In the 18th century, a man walked the earth who seemed almost mythical. His name was Charles Byrne, but to the world he was known as the Irish Giant. His towering frame, standing over 7 feet tall, captivated audiences, but his story is far more than a tale of physical stature. It is a story of wonder, exploitation, resilience, and the enduring human spirit. Imagine living in a world where your very existence was a spectacle, a time when curiosity and science collided and the extraordinary became the subject of both fascination and exploitation. For Charles Byrne, his life was both a gift and a burden, a life that revealed the best and worst of 18th century society. But who was Charles Byrne beyond the moniker of the Irish Giant? How did he navigate a world that celebrated and objectified him in equal measure? In this video, we'll uncover his extraordinary life, his challenges, and his legacy. A legacy that forces us to confront how society treats those who are different. So who was this man who defied his era? And why does his story still resonate today? To answer these questions, we must go back to where it all began, the rolling hills of Ireland. Charles Byrne was born in 1761 in the rural village of Littlebridge, County Londonderry, Ireland. His family lived a simple life, marked by the struggles of poverty common in 18th century Ireland. His father, likely a weaver, and his mother, of Scottish descent, were ordinary people. Yet their son was destined to be anything but ordinary. From a young age, it was clear that Charles was different. He grew at an astonishing rate, towering over his peers in a way that sparked both amazement and concern. Unknown at the time, Charles had pituitary gigantism, caused by a benign tumour flooding his body with growth hormones, propelling him to an almost otherworldly height. In Littlebridge, such an anomaly would not have gone unnoticed. While no records survive of how neighbours reacted, it's easy to imagine the mix of awe and curiosity that surrounded him in a time of limited medical understanding. Charles's condition was likely seen as a mystery, perhaps even divine intervention or misfortune. For his family, Charles's condition was both a source of pride and a challenge. Raising a child who outgrew clothes and furniture rapidly could not have been easy, especially in a household constrained by poverty. Yet his height hinted at possibilities beyond the quiet fields of rural Ireland, a gateway to a wider world. Charles's early years laid the foundation for the man he would become. The quiet village shaped his childhood, but his towering frame would soon propel him into a very different world, one where his uniqueness would bring fame and unforeseen challenges. In 1782, Charles Byrne left behind the familiarity of his Irish village and arrived in London, the epicentre of curiosity and spectacle. London was a city alive with contradictions, where Enlightenment ideals of reason coexisted with a thriving culture of public exhibitions. Here, Byrne's extraordinary height became both his ticket to fame and the source of his exploitation. Charles quickly became known as the Irish Giant, performing at venues like Spring Gardens. Crowds flocked to marvel at the man who stood over 7 feet tall, far above the average height of the time. His exhibitions drew everyone from curious commoners to aristocrats fascinated by human anomalies. But Charles was not alone in the world of public spectacle. He shared stages with others seen as curiosities, such as Count Joseph Borulaski, a Polish dwarf just over 3 feet tall. Together they embodied the era's obsession with physical extremes. Yet behind the posters and packed audiences lay a deeper truth. Charles was increasingly reduced to a sideshow attraction. His fame brought financial rewards, but also profound isolation. To the public he was the Irish Giant, a marvel to be admired but never fully understood. Few considered the person behind the title, a man navigating a world that treated him as extraordinary yet other. Despite this objectification, Charles's wit and intelligence shone through. Contemporary accounts describe a man of charm and humour, capable of connecting with those around him. However, the adoration of the crowds often masked a harsher reality, the exploitation he faced. Managers and exhibitors profited greatly from his uniqueness while offering him little agency or control over his career. Charles Byrne's rise to fame in London was a double-edged sword. It lifted him above his humble beginnings, but exposed him to the darker side of human fascination. A fascination that would come to define both his life and his legacy. Fame, for all its promises, carries undeniable weight. For Charles Byrne, the world's fascination with his height came at a steep personal cost. Behind the admiration of crowds lay a life of physical suffering, emotional isolation, and relentless exploitation. Pituitary gigantism, the source of his fame, also caused severe health issues. Chronic joint pain, limited mobility, and constant fatigue plagued him, exacerbated by the grueling demands of public exhibitions. In an era with limited medical knowledge, such symptoms went largely untreated, forcing Charles to endure his suffering in silence. Emotionally, the burden was equally heavy. To audiences, Charles was the Irish giant, a marvel to be admired but not truly understood. Few considered the loneliness that came with being reduced to a spectacle. His towering presence, which brought crowds and acclaim, also set him apart in ways that were profoundly isolating. Adding to these challenges was the exploitation he faced. Managers and exhibitors saw Charles as a product, a means to profit from public fascination. Though he earned money, much of it was siphoned away by those who controlled his career. Charles, the centerpiece of the show, often had little control over his own life. Yet, amidst these hardships, Charles retained his dignity and wit. Contemporary accounts speak of his intelligence and humor, traits that allowed him to connect with others despite the barriers of fame. He was not merely a spectacle, he was a man navigating the complexities of his unique existence with resilience. But as the demands of fame grew, so too did the toll it took on Charles's health and spirit. The very crowds that celebrated him also confined him, turning his life into a paradox of admiration and alienation. And as his physical condition worsened, the challenges of fame became increasingly insurmountable. For all the hardships he endured, Charles Byrne was not a man defined solely by his struggles. Behind the towering frame and the public persona was an individual of remarkable self-awareness. Charles understood the transactional nature of his fame and sought to define his legacy on his own terms. Near the end of his life, Charles made a remarkable request. He wished to be buried at sea. This was not merely a preference, but a deliberate act of self-determination. He knew his body, like his life, could become an object of exploitation. By requesting burial at sea, he sought to protect his dignity, ensuring his remains would not be displayed or dissected. Tragically, his wish was ignored. After his death in 1783, his body was secretly acquired by the anatomist John Hunter, who preserved his skeleton for scientific study. For centuries, Byrne's remains have been displayed, sparking ethical debates that persist to this day. Should his remains be returned to the sea, fulfilling his dying wish, or does their scientific value justify their preservation? Charles Byrne's story forces us to confront timeless questions about dignity, exploitation, and how we value those who are different. He was more than the Irish giant. He was a man who sought to define his own story, even in the face of immense challenges. His legacy is not just a relic of the past, but a mirror reflecting the struggles of humanity to balance curiosity with compassion.